it's me, Miss Fry. I'm sort of doing this by twilight. I'm sorry it's taking me so long today to get this done. There's a lot of organizing today. It was so great to see you this morning. I miss you guys. It's not the same. I know we're making the best of it, but just know you are missed. I am excited to read to you today. The book is always good, I think, but it's really going to get fast-paced, even more so. And we're on chapter 21. We left off with Ruth asking about Ada's club foot. You had a bad foot. What is a club foot? Is that why you limp? And Ada shoots her a look that she said, I learned from Lady Thornton. I don't limp. I don't have any idea what you mean. Chapter 21. The new fire watching rota finally came out. Susan handed me a copy of it when she came back from working at the WVS, and I scanned the paper for my name. Lady Thornton, I said. I pushed it back at Susan. They've got me going up with Lady Thornton. So, said Susan, you knew fire watchers worked in pairs. I didn't want to fire watch with Lady Thornton. The idea of fire watching with anyone made me anxious enough, let alone her. You know, I said. Susan shook her head at me. I don't. She did. She just wouldn't admit it. We were assigned an early shift, 8 o'clock at night until 10. On the proper night, we bundled up and set out together into the darkness. Gasoline was rationed now, and even Lady Thornton no longer drove anywhere she could reach on foot. Heavy clouds blanketed the black sky. Wind whistled through bare branches and dead leaves in the hedge. A faraway bird made a soft, low noise. That's an owl, Lady Thornton said. I looked up at her. What's an owl? She raised her eyebrows, but after a moment answered, a nocturnal bird. You almost never see them in daytime. I nodded, yet another thing I didn't know. At the doors of the church, Lady Thornton paused. On a night like tonight, the way up will be very dark, she said. Follow me closely. We'll go slow. The inside of the church smelled of smoke and candle wax. It was so quiet I could hear Lady Thornton breathe, but once we began climbing the staircase, I couldn't see anything at all. The stairwell was utterly dark. I clutched the handrail with one hand and the back of Lady Thornton's coat with the other. I tried to feel my way up, but I wasn't used to trusting how things felt beneath my feet. Any moment I could miss a step and fall. Lady Thornton missed a step and stumbled. I pitched forward into her. Careful, she said. We sidled into the bell ringer's room, and then I made myself breathe deep, as quietly as I could. Now the ladder. Up, up. At the top, the sideways jump to the other stair. Lady Thornton swung the little door open. I followed too close. The edge of the door hit my forehead. I gasped, startled, and nearly slipped. Sorry. Out on the steps ledge, Lady Thornton ran her thumbs over my face. They felt cold and hard. I didn't flinch. Well, you're not bleeding. That's good. She pulled the door shut behind us. So we don't go tumbling into the night. She sounded perfectly calm, as though the idea of falling down that dark hole was nothing to worry about. As though we weren't standing out in the high, open sky waiting for Germans to come and bomb us, watching for their bombs and fires. Lady Thornton had something called binoculars to look through. They make faraway things seem closer, Lady Thornton said. Would you like to try them? I shook my head. I'd need both hands to hold the binoculars, and then I wouldn't be able to steady myself against the stone wall. Walk around and watch for light or movement, Lady Thornton said. We're almost guaranteed not to have any bombers tonight. It's too dark. She smiled thinly. It's very dull up here most of the time. Good of you to want to take a turn. I like to be useful, I said. Yes, I know, Lady Thornton replied. Susan's turning you into a regular little housewife, isn't she? With all the cooking and sewing she's taught you. She almost sounded scornful of Susan, which I didn't appreciate at all. Since she'd come to live with us, Lady Thornton had not cooked any part of a single meal, though she'd done her full share of the eating. I like to cook, I said. I like having good food. Lady Thornton put down her binoculars. My eyes had adjusted to the dark enough that I could see her face, unruffled as always. Of course, she said. I understand. I suppose your mother was a good cook too? Not really, I said. I'm sorry, Lady Thornton said. I shouldn't have mentioned her. I know you must miss her terribly. No, I said. Why would you think that? Trying to make it lighter. She had stopped listening. She walked around the far side of the steeple and aimed the binoculars at the leaden sky. The wind blew hard. I thought I could find the steeple away. I thought I could feel the steeple sway. Surely not. Surely the steeple was safe. It had been atop the church a long time. A sound like a gunshot below us. I bit my lip hard and stifled a scream. It's just a tree branch, Lady Thornton called, from the opposite side of the steeple. Those old trees round the graveyard. Sometimes they lose a limb when the wind gets heavy. My gosh, it's getting darker and darker. Can you guys see me? Come, we get closer. My speeded up heart rate refused to slow down. Minutes crawled like hours. My toes and fingers went numb. Lady Thornton opened a thing called a thermos flask and gave me a drink of wonderful, still warm tea. I've realized that I like to feel useful too, Lady Thornton said. She smiled. Before the war, I had a lot more fun, but I wasn't anywhere near as useful. I suppose that was true. All Lady Thornton's WVS work was voluntary. She didn't have to do any of it. She could have gone off somewhere posh and waited out the war. I remember you on evacuation day, I said. She'd been so commanding that I nearly mistook her for an army officer. Her WVS uniform looked like something an officer would wear. Yes, Lady Thornton said. I was never taught to cook or sew, and unlike Susan, I can't do maths past arithmetic. But I'm a good organizer. I don't mind standing out here in the cold either. I'll help with the war however I can. After a pause, she added, I'd do anything to bring Jonathan safely home. Chapter 22. On the day Lady Thornton moved in with us, she had handed Susan her ration book and said, Don't worry, I intend to do my bit. She might be willing to do war work, but her housekeeping bit was not large. Jamie mopped and dusted more than she did, and Susan and I did nearly all the shopping and cooking. Lady Thornton never even helped with washing up. She said, You all understand that sort of thing so much better than me. Of course, she could only start to understand the shopping by sometimes actually doing the shopping, and I suppose she did know it. The day after our fire watch, she took everyone's ration books, including Ruth's, and spent 2 weeks' worth of meat coupons on 1 pound of lamb. 5 tiny, elegant pieces of lamb. Lovely chops, Lady Thornton said, with a bit of rosemary. 10 shillings, Susan shouted. It was the first time in months I'd seen her so angry. Meat was rationed by price, not amount. Each person in Britain, no matter whether they were rich or poor, was only allowed to spend 1 shilling per week on meat. If you wanted lots of meat, you stuck to the cheap stuff. If you wanted higher quality, you got hardly any at all. Susan, dear, you're a marvelous cook, but the cuts you've been choosing are dreadful. Lady Thornton held up a chop. Only look, the butcher said it was the best he'd had in weeks. We can't afford the best, Susan said. These children need to eat meat more than once a fortnight. What am I supposed to feed them tomorrow? Lady Thornton set the chop down. Well, perhaps eggs. The new egg ration was 1 egg per person per week. Or something, said Lady Thornton. Susan sighed. We can't give them back, she said. I suppose we might as well enjoy them. Lady Thornton smiled. I'll select a bottle of wine. She brought crates of wine over from Thornton House. Susan seared the chops in a hot pan with a sprinkle of pepper and rosemary and made a fancy kind of gravy. The chops smelled fantastic, but were half the size of my fist. That was all the meat we'd get for the next 2 weeks. A good meal lifts the spirits, Lady Thornton said as we sat down to eat. I stared at her. Her face froze. Ruth, she said. Whatever Lady Thornton said Ruth's name, her face screwed up like she was smelling something nasty. Ruth, what is that by your plate? It was an envelope. Ruth looked down, saw it, and picked it up. She started to smile. It came in today's mail, said Susan. Lady Thornton held out her hand. Give it to me. No, said Ruth. Her smile disappeared. It's mine. She started to tuck the envelope into her pocket. Lady Thornton snatched it out of her hand. Eleanor, Susan protested. I consider it my duty. Lady Thornton replied. Mail delivered to a German in my house. She ripped open the... Oh, my God. You don't open anybody else's mail. She ripped open the envelope and shook out the piece of paper inside. Ruth cried out soft, like an owl. Lady Thornton's face went red. Well, I can't read a word of it. I should have known. It's all German. Ruth pushed back from the table. How dare you, she shouted. Bright red spots bloomed on her cheeks. She grabbed her letter, ran up the stairs to her room, and slammed and locked the door. Jamie whimpered. I reached under the table and squeezed his hand. Susan said, that was completely unnecessary. Lady Thornton said, I agree. Her behavior was reprehensible. Susan looked her in the eye. I meant your behavior. It was impossible for me to eat after that. I hated fighting. Susan never hit me, but Lady Thornton might. She looked ready to wallop Ruth for sure. Eat your chop, Susan said to me. I pushed my plate away. I'm not hungry. Eat it, Lady Thornton commanded through a mouthful of meat. In wartime, we do not waste food. I looked at her. I couldn't eat that chop, not even to keep her from walloping me, not when Ruth's chop sat untouched on her plate. Ada is my responsibility. Susan's voice had an edge I didn't understand. I'll be the one who decides what she does. She swept up my plate and Jamie's and Ruth's. Ada, Jamie, you may be excused. We'll save the rest of this for tomorrow. Jamie and I washed the dishes like always. Susan and Lady Thornton sat at the table, drinking tea and talking in hard, quiet voices. I tried like anything to hear what they were saying, but Jamie splashed too much and they kept their voices down. When Lady Thornton went into the sitting room, Susan went to the larder. She cut 3 big slices of bread and spread them with some of the gravy she'd made for the lamb. Take these upstairs, she said to us. I nodded. She meant where Lady Thornton couldn't see us. I knocked on Ruth's door. Go away, she said. It's Ada. I've got something for you. Go away. I know you're hungry. Do your ears work worse than your foot? Go away. The next morning at breakfast, I said to Ruth, there's nothing wrong with my foot. Ruth shrugged. You can say that if you want to. My foot's fixed. Susan called it a club foot, Ruth said. You limp. You always limp, and some days you limp more. I do not. I was lying. I knew I limped even though I tried hard not to. Ruth, Susan said, Ada prefers to keep her foot private. Ah, said Ruth, like my letters. Lady Thornton sat down in time to hear that. She didn't flinch. I have a right to know with whom you correspond. So next time, you can ask me instead of opening my mail. Ruth began to eat. She didn't say who her letter was from. Lady Thornton tapped her fingers against the table. Silence stretched out. Jamie looked at me anxiously. Who wrote to you, Ruth? Susan finally asked. My mother, she said. My mother, who is by herself in an internment camp. What's an internment camp? Asked Jamie. Jail, I said. Certainly not, Lady Thornton said. Internment camps are merely places to keep watch on enemy aliens. Tell me, Ruth, what did your letter say? Ruth sniffed. None of your business. They have censors in the internment camp. If my mother wrote anything controversial, I wouldn't have gotten the letter. Lady Thornton frowned. Is that true? Of course it's true, said Ruth. Why do you think it took her so long to write to me? Not because she was writing things she shouldn't, because she's only allowed to write one letter, one single piece of paper each week. And she has to write to my father and to my grandmother and our family back in Germany. And now she finally got to write to me, and I will never tell you what she said. I will go back to that camp myself first. Ruth's voice rose until she was shouting. We want you to stay here, Susan said. Lord Thornton, Susan glared at Lady Thornton, wants you to stay here. I hadn't even realized that Ruth hadn't received my letters. Any letters. Maggie wrote her mother 3 times a week and me nearly as often. Jamie said, why doesn't your mother come live with us? We've got a big enough cave. Lady Thornton made a noise in her throat, but Ruth answered first. She can't, she said. The British government won't let her. I said, in case she's a spy? Yes, Ruth said warily. in case she's a spy. Oh, I feel bad. I feel bad. How you guys feeling after that? I'm going to stop for the day because my light is going badly and I haven't figured out yet how to be a YouTube star, as you can tell. Okay, I like Ruth. I like her, and I like what she's showing us. I mean, I don't like what she's showing us, but I like through her character, we're getting a glimpse of what life was like for many people in her situation. I mean, I use the word fascinating, not in a, it's mind-blowing, really. All the different facets of this situation, this horrible situation. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Tomorrow I'll record the next 2 or 3 chapters in a brighter light. Sorry about this. And I'll see you tomorrow for our morning meeting, and then I'll see each one of you guys in smaller groups. I hope you got the Zoom invites, and have I told you that I missed you? Yeah? Okay, good. I miss you. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye!